And now, from the University of Virginia Center for Politics.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't expect you to be responsive, but thank you. That's because I teach in this room, and the students are never responsive, and most of them don't show up. I've never seen this thing full before, but that's because we have special guests here today, and we're very, very fortunate to have with us two phenomenal journalists, as you well know. Bob Woodward, an associate editor of the Washington Post, where he's worked for more than 50 years. He's shared in 2 Pulitzer Prizes, first in 1973 for the coverage of the Watergate scandal with Carl Bernstein. And I had a student ask me, yeah, go ahead. Last year, I had a student ask me right after class, now tell me again, what was that Watergate scandal about? And so anyway, it just goes to show. And then he got a second prize in 2002 as the lead reporter for coverage of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He has authored or co-authored, I just can't even almost believe this, he's authored or co-authored 22 books, every one of them a national bestseller. Isn't that incredible? His 4 books on the Trump presidency, part 1, in 2018, Fear. In 2020, Rage. In 2021, Peril. And now just released, I think about a month ago, War. I guess we're back to Fear. We'll have a revised edition of Fear. They were all #1 New York Times bestsellers, which is, again, just incredible. Another 12 of his books have been New York Times #1 bestsellers. That's kind of greedy, Bob, really, when I look at it. You know, there's so many academics don't have that. And of course, his audiobook and transcript and so on. The Trump tapes were a shocking look at President-elect Trump's first 4 years in office. And just think how many more books you're going to get out of the second term. Now, that assumes you're not in a gulag. You just don't know. Or a detention camp. They may not have good writing spaces. I wish I was kidding. You're very responsive, sir. Don't do that. Don't do any more of that. Now, Robert Costa, who I saw this morning on Face the Nation and got worried because of the timing. I thought, how in the heck is he going to make it to Charlottesville? And he and our UVA graduate, Margaret Brennan, had an early taping just for us. Give him a round of applause. And you've seen him all during the election, chief election and campaign correspondent for CBS News, where he covers national politics, American democracy, and definitely this past campaign. The most important thing on Robert's resume, though, is he is a scholar at our Center for Politics. The most important thing. Thank you. You can say something, sir. That's okay, as long as it's good. I know you will. Before joining CBS News in 2022, Robert and Mr. Woodward co-wrote Peril, which documented, and what we've already said, the transition between the Trump presidency and the Biden presidency. Did I mention it was a #1 New York Times bestseller? I think that's come up. From 2014 to 2021, Robert was a national political reporter at the Washington Post, and he was also the moderator and managing editor of Washington Week on PBS from 2017 to 2020. I don't have to tell you how much in demand they are right now and how lucky we are to have them with us. So please welcome Bob Woodward and Robert Costa.
Thank you very much. Can you guys all hear me? Thank you very much, Dr. Sabato. I was getting worried that introduction was going on too long. Last time I was here, Bob, I was with Senator Bernie Sanders. Dr. Sabato gave a very complimentary introduction, went very long, and Senator Sanders started hitting me, saying, let's get this event going. So let's get this event going. I really appreciate you being here, so generous of Bob to come down from Washington, D.C. Obviously, we're in such a moment, and I want to thank also Dr. Sabato, the whole UVA team at the Center for Politics, Glenn, for helping put this event together. Very much appreciated. Thanks for all of you for coming out. But we're in such a moment in the American story, and war is just a tour de force of reporting. And I would like to begin the conversation, if you don't mind, Bob, by going to page 142 of War. And there's a conversation Senator Lindsey Graham has with Donald Trump, then the former president. They had played a round of golf in Bedminster, New Jersey, just outside New York City. And
I was caddying.
Who gives a bigger tip, Graham or Trump?
Listen, when I caddy for them, I don't want a tip.
That's a book right there. So Senator Graham, this is 2022, the timing matters. He says to Trump on the golf course, based on Bob's reporting here in War, quote, "If you run and win in 2024, then it's the biggest second act in the history of American politics. Then you have 4 years to rewrite your legacy and make Trumpism a more sustainable movement. It becomes something you can pass on to the next generation." Trump's attention seemed to latch on to Graham. He liked that a lot. After a moment, Trump said, "What does that mean?" "Second acts are hard to get in politics, Mr. President," Graham said. "If you get a second act, use it." Reflect on
Isn't
that.
that amazing? On the golf course, there's often a lot of untruth on the golf course, but this was the truth.
And what do you make of this moment?
That we're in now, wow, what a surprise to me. And I did not see it coming. And what I've thought about is here, Trump is Trump. As best I can tell, he hasn't changed. Extraordinary opportunity. And I've covered 10 presidents going back to Nixon, and by and large, with the exception of Nixon, they all grew. They grew in office and saw with more clarity their obligation and opportunity as president. Let's hope this is Trump. Now, I've spent a lot of time with Trump. The last year of his first presidency in 2020, I did 19 interviews with him, 9 hours. This was the year of the coronavirus. And he did not even begin to understand what his responsibility was to communicate the warnings he had, and the outcome was tragic. I remember on July 20th, my last interview with him by phone, and I said, Mr. President, 140,000 people have been warned about this virus. You were, killed by the virus. You were warned when there was one case in the country in January, and your response was not enough at all. And so in the summer I'm saying, and for months I'd been saying, what's your plan? And he said, don't worry. He always told me not to worry. And I said, but 140,000 people have died. Serious problem. What's your plan? And he literally said, don't worry, I'll have a plan in 106 days. And I kind of froze up. 106 days? That was election day. He was worried about the election at that point. Now, with the situation, 140,000 people, have died. The virus killed 1.1 million Americans. You would think he would go into action. 106 days, it's as if we're sitting somewhere and the house is on fire. And you say to me, gee, I think we ought to call the fire department. And I said, well, let's wait 106 days. What would you think?
The Trump tapes, if you have not listened to them, I actually prefer to listen to the Trump tapes. It's a great book as well, the transcripts. But the Trump tapes are so revealing to hear his voice speaking to you. But what's very notable about your latest book, War, is that to really understand Trump, you can go back and listen to the Trump tapes. You can study the Trump presidency. But you also have to think about Trump's life, his career. You talk about the lack of growth as a political leader and as a president. But there are parts of Trump that have evolved in some ways. There are some parts that are telling from the past that really help us understand the present. And if you haven't read it yet, I'm not giving it away, this book begins with a moment 35 years ago. You and Carl Bernstein go interview Donald Trump, then businessman Donald Trump, at Trump Tower. What?
In New York City. I mean, Carl was at a party, not unusual. And he called me and said, Donald Trump's here. And Trump was this real estate king in New York City. And he said, let's interview him. And I said, why? He's got nothing to do with politics. And Carl said, well, it's interesting. So we interviewed him, and it's the beginning of this book because it's the first view, at least for us in recording form, of Trumpism. And Trumpism is, he lays down some rules. Don't fold, never fold when they hit you. And he's doing real estate in New York. When they hit you with fines and so, F them, never pay, always fight, never fold. And at the end, he says, to deal with people, there are two modes. You're either a killer or you're candy. Now think of that. A killer or candy. Or both.
You have reporting in War about President-elect Trump's relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And you report on calls they've had since he left the White House in 2021. And you also have this fascinating piece of new reporting on Trump while he was president, sending COVID tests to Putin.
For his personal use, not the tests, very expensive equipment for his personal use.
And what was Putin's reaction to getting these tests?
Thank you. And then he said, don't tell anyone. And Trump said, oh no, don't worry. And said, no, don't tell anyone because people will be mad at you. So now it comes out in the book, and Trump denies it, of course. To my utter astonishment, the Kremlin confirmed it. So I've now put the Kremlin on speed dial. You never know. The Kremlin confirmed it. So you know, sometimes you never know where the confirmation comes from.
I mean, Bob, you taught me and so many others, knock on every door.
The Kremlin? I mean, that came out of the blue. But now I'm thinking like you are, I know, and this is an important moment for our profession, journalism. It's an important moment for the country. It's an important moment for Donald Trump. He's now president-elect. What is he going to do? How does he view this? My motto, as you and I, when we did our book Peril together and have worked together, is report, report. When you've done reporting, do more reporting. At the same time, I have taken the position, look, Trump's got this opportunity. My motto is no cheap shots. I want to make sure there are no cheap shots, because I think cheap shots get into a lot of everyone's journalism, and I think there shouldn't be at this moment. At the same time, the very aggressive standards need to be applied here. When I spent all this time talking to Trump, hours and hours, he just doesn't understand lots of things. And that is a problem for a president. And so we're going to see. He has the opportunity to grow. We also learn that people don't change. And so we're in that, we're going to be tested, you realize, all the time. How are we doing? Gee, is someone leaning toward Trump or against Trump? And you and I, we've worked together for years, straight down the middle, not for him, not against him, but no cheap shots and not a free ride.
As the President of the United States, in a few months, President-elect Trump will have to confront not only a complicated political reality, but a complicated foreign policy landscape. And war reveals just how dangerous the world is right now. President Biden confronting unrest and violence in the Middle East, especially after October 7th, and the war in Ukraine continues, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What most people I find when I'm out there on the campaign trail don't fully process, but your book underscores again and again with reporting, and I'd love if you could kind of illuminate it for this discussion, is the specter of nuclear weapons being used. How close we came in recent years to Russia potentially using nuclear weapons in its war with Ukraine.
Yeah. If I may, if you'll bear with me to read some of this, because this is a literal, authenticated, top secret transcript of a call between Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, October 2022. And this is what Austin says, who, by the way, I went through this with him. I took it to his office in the Pentagon, and he didn't know I had it, and I started reading it. And I'm going through, and he goes, "It's accurate, it's accurate."
There's nothing like Bob Woodward reading a transcript to you.
Well, but here's what the transcript says, and this is why you're exactly, this is a time of danger internationally, and overhangs all of this is the silent shadow of nuclear weapons. And thank God we haven't used nuclear weapons. No one has used them. It's almost been 80 years since Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So in this top secret call, Austin says to Shoigu, "We know you are contemplating the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. First, he said, and this is something, I'm not going to read it at all, but it should be plastered to the wall in the Oval Office, because it's why the world needs to avoid the use of nuclear weapons. And Austin lays it out. And he says, first, any use of nuclear weapons on any scale against anyone would be seen by the United States and the world as a world-changing event. There is no scale of nuclear weapons that could be overlooked, or that we, the United States, could overlook. Any use of nuclear weapons anywhere would implicate the vital national interest of the United States. I'm going to go on a little bit because this is verified, and this is a moment where you see the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, being very strong and actually wise. He says, it wouldn't matter how small the nuclear weapon is. It would set in, or could set in motion, events that you, the Russians, cannot control and we cannot control. If you did this, all the restraints that we have been operating under in Ukraine would be reconsidered. This would isolate Russia on the world stage to a degree you Russians cannot fully appreciate it. He went on laying out this case. The whole case is in the book. Shogu finally says he doesn't like it. He doesn't, and he says, I don't take kindly to being threatened. Austin says bluntly, Mr. Minister, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats. They then eventually brief Biden on it. They go to the Oval Office and they go through it, and they literally, unbeknownst to us 2 years ago, are doing nuclear war planning in the Biden White House because they know they have to have a plan on how to respond to this. Much more dangerous. I was surprised as a reporter, even shocked, to see how tense it got with the Russians on this very central survival issue, and that is somebody going to start using nuclear weapons?
And this all gets to a bigger point in war, which is, yes, Trump dominates the headlines. He dominates the national discussion. But over the past 3.5 years, you've had Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, CIA Director Bill Burns, all these major characters in your book, but often, frankly, little known by the public, confronting these major issues and dangers without much attention. It raises the question of, have we fully understood the Biden presidency, especially in terms of what it has confronted and done on national security and foreign policy?
As you and I agree on, you never fully understand anything as a reporter. And you are forced into a corner, and the small space in that corner is humility, because you know you have some of the story, good sources, but you do not have the full story. And what is so interesting in the course of reporting this book, that there was such a worry about what might happen that the director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, she oversees the CIA, the National Security Agency, and so forth, and says, in the course of these events, we need to realize that as Russia's had a hard time, difficult time, they have gotten weaker, but that makes them more dangerous, not less dangerous. A truth in international relations and history that when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, it was not out of confidence, it was about worry that they aren't going to have enough oil or enough rubber. It was out of a self-perception of weakness.
You've covered diplomacy, foreign policy, national security for decades, written many books on the topic. I was trying to understand and conceptualize what I was really learning from this book, and I believe page 287, when you're talking about CIA Director Bill Burns, you write that he has talked about operating in the so-called gray zone, and that governing, navigating foreign policy, national security, it's not always black and white, front page news, it's a gray zone.
Yeah, and Bill Burns, probably one of the most important people in our government now. I suspect Trump would not keep him on, but Burns, probably one of the most qualified people in government. He previously had been ambassador to Moscow 10, 15 years ago and knew Putin, believe it or not. And now he's the CIA director and realizes the perpetual dangers that are out there. And the problem is in these confrontations, as the one I'm describing here, things can go south real fast. And there is a scene I have in this book in which the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, is one of the most powerful figures in the world because of all the oil they have. And he is a young Crown Prince and rules exactly the way he wants. And he's talking with somebody else in an important government, which is all laid out in the book. And MBS says, you know, in Saudi Arabia we have uranium, so we could make nuclear weapons. And then his person he's talking to says, yeah, you know, that wouldn't be hard. And MBS says, no, it wouldn't be hard, but you know, I can buy one from Pakistan. Now, there are 9 countries in the world that have nuclear weapons that we know of. And there is much going on in the world relations involving Russia, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, one of the most dangerous autocrats on earth, has his own nuclear weapons that are concealed, are hardened, and are dispersed. So, and you know, you don't do those 3 things unless you want to make them impregnable to attack. And you start looking at some of the things behind the scenes and match them up with what's going on publicly. Kim Jong-un is very, very dangerous, and he has now formed an alliance with Russia. And so much worry about that. I report that President Biden called the president of China, Xi, and said, please say something about this. And Xi went public and said, let's not use nuclear weapons. And so we're living on the cusp of that danger, and the people who know the most about it have the most worry.
What's your summary assessment, Bob, of President Biden, someone who was forged ahead of his presidency, not only by being on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but 8 years as vice president with President Obama, watching Putin get aggressive with Crimea. When he finally wins the presidency in 2020 and Russia invades in the next year or two, how does he handle it, and how do you believe he has handled it in terms of not committing ground troops, managing Putin? When we look back on history and your reporting, what's your assessment of it all, Biden's handling it?
What is very important that President Biden did is in late 2021, when we had exquisite intelligence showing that Russia was going to invade Ukraine, he did not send U.S. ground troops intentionally, because Joe Biden's 81 and he remembers something called Vietnam, when the United States thought we would solve a foreign policy problem by sending 500,000. I mean, can you believe that? I was one of them. I was in the Navy and on a ship off the coast of Vietnam. And I remember it was a radar picket ship, and we would just go round and round for months. And I remember sitting in my bunk thinking, what the F are we doing here? And since I've tried to study some of these events, I'm only more alarmed. So what Biden did by not sending ground troops, someday President Donald Trump will call him up and say thank you. Pardon?
I think they doubt the phone call is coming. But your point is...
Keep an open mind. Sometimes when somebody does you an earth-shaking favor, and if you can realize it, you'd be willing to say thank you. I also absorb your skepticism.
Another key part of war is President Biden and his advisors dealing with the fallout of October 7th. Striking.
In the Middle East.
In the Middle East.
Yeah.
Striking to read your reporting on President Biden's scathing view of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes, he is quoted in the book saying that Netanyahu is a liar, not very happy with him, though there is an alliance. It's a kind of an alliance we're pro-Israel, but not pro-Netanyahu. And at one point, Biden goes to the point of saying, Bibi Netanyahu is an effing liar, and 18 of the 19 people who work for him are effing liars. That's not a great endorsement.
And I haven't seen the White House contest that part of the book.
No, the book's been out for a couple of weeks or 10 days, and nothing has been contested.
Where does the Middle East go from here, based on your reporting over the past 2 years, in terms of Netanyahu will now deal with Trump? I know you don't want to predict anything, but as a reporter who has been steeped in this, studying it, talking to the key players, what does this transition of power potentially mean for the United States and Israel?
Big relationship for President-elect Trump, and it's going to test him because Everyone I've ever talked to about Netanyahu says they've been tested. He's tough. He's looking out for two things, actually three things: Netanyahu, Netanyahu, and Netanyahu. Larry's nodding his head.
President Biden as a person comes through in the pages of War. There's so much here about the shadow of Hunter Biden and his issues looming over.
His son, very troubled son, yes.
And it pains the president, based on your reporting, to watch his son struggle and deal with his legal issues and personal issues. And you also have the president grappling with his own presidency. Talk about Secretary Blinken and the conversations that were had in the summer of 2024.
Yeah, well, I mean, just real quickly about Hunter, one of Biden's closest associates told me Hunter is the real war.
Hunter is the real war?
Because it is so personal to President Biden. Sometimes personal things overshadow the day job. And Hunter has been had so many difficulties that it's literally called the first war. And Biden is quoted in the book saying that what has happened to Hunter is because he, Joe Biden, was president, and that this wouldn't be happening if Joe Biden wasn't president. Maybe a certain truth in that.
And we're going to take some questions in a couple minutes. But one other part of the book that's gotten a lot of attention, and now it will continue to receive attention, that Trump is the president-elect, is retired General Milley is alarmed. And we reported this in Peril about the final days in Milley's alarm as Trump fought the election result and tried to overturn the election. But you've added new reporting about General Milley. Talk about that and the broader concerns among some retired officials and military officials.
Well, first of all, Milley is chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That's the #1 military job. Who appointed him to that job? Donald Trump in 2019. And Milley served, and Milley is one of the most respected generals. And he looks on Trump, he sees Trump as the gravest danger for this country. And there's some things he says about Trump and his, core worry that this man is not fit to be president. So it's, I don't think Milley's going to be reappointed by President Trump to any position except maybe chairman of the retirement board.
Let's take some questions from the audience. I believe we have a microphone. And just state your name and just please keep the questions brief. Thank you.
Mason Montgomery, and you said that there was serious consideration of sending U.S. troops to Ukraine. I just wanted to clarify that I heard that right. This sounds to run counter to the...
I mean, when the option was available and President Biden decided no, he got a lot of pushback from his staff. And there is a feeling often in the military that sending U.S. troops is a quick Band-Aid to solve problems, as we found in Vietnam. Most seriously, it creates problems also. So that was an argument people were making to Biden, and Biden, he remembers Vietnam.
So you're saying it was dramatic important for President Biden to publicly rule that out. That was a statement
Yes, he
that,
did.
to the military as much as it was to the public.
Yeah, and it was a statement of, if you will, almost moral priorities, that we have an obligation to defend America, and we will send troops if America is threatened, but America was not threatened at this time, and so he didn't send troops. I'll stick with my prediction, which there are lots of doubters. I think President Trump may someday call him and thank him for doing that. Now, we'll see. If it happens, you can say, I heard it from this old guy many months or years ago.
Why do you think Kamala Harris lost this election? And do you think Trump will mature in this term and be a more serious president? Or do you think it's the end of us?
I mean, why Harris lost, I don't know. I mean,
Real quick,
okay.
to answer that question,
Sure.
there's a fascinating scene in the book of Vice President Harris as part of a national security meeting talking through how to handle Israel and strikes on Iran
Right.
and take the win.
Yeah, and she feels that the violence, the exchange between Israel and Iran, it kind of, Iran had sent, I believe, 200 missiles toward Israel, and they knocked them all down, or all but one, and so forth. And they're discussing this in the NSC, and Vice President Harris says, take the win. And Joe Biden then says a few things and then says to the entire NSC, take the win, which is often good advice. As long as you're absolutely sure it's a win and not a loss.
Do you think Donald Trump will mature under this next 4 years, or is that just...
Well, I have the answer written down right here.
Hi. Considering
I mean, let's, one thing, having done presidents, back to Nixon up through Trump's first term, and so that all presidents change, and some of them grow in a very, very important way. And so, that's the future, and it's outside my reach, frankly.
I'll just add, I was on Face the Nation this morning with UVA's Margaret Brennan, and I spoke to Trump in recent days, and it's so different to report and observe on Trump now versus
Now,
2016.
Just listen to what you're hearing. Bob Costa, I know, is the greatest reporter ever.
No,
is
Bob
able
Schieffer says that about Woodward.
Yeah, no. Put that down.
Hey, you published
I'm
it.
talking about you. You're talking about, talk today to Donald Trump, the president-elect, and that you can do that. I think if I tried, I wouldn't even get a busy signal.
It's more dangerous to ignore Bob Woodward's call.
No, it's not. And I mean, this is remarkable. And listen, we worked together for years on everything, and it is, talk a little bit about, for the audience, or what
Sure,
you're
well, just
able to do. Why are you able to talk to him?
What did he say? What do you think?
Well, just to answer your question briefly, you asked about whether he will, quote, mature. I can't speak to his maturity, but I can speak as a reporter to his comfort level with power. I covered every moment of the transition in 2016, He was a total outsider. He had no real knowledge of the players. And sensing this, all of the players, McConnell, Ryan, and others, decided to fill in the gaps for him. Chris Christie had a whole transition plan set for Trump. Steve Bannon threw it in the trash, as Steve Bannon tends to do with things that are established.
And that's now, this week.
Well, no, this was back in 2016. Remember when he fired Christie?
Oh, yes, okay.
It's in fear.
When
And,
you mentioned Bannon
Bannon
and
is
trash,
now-
I
Bannon-
just thought...
Well,
no.
fair. Trump is so at ease now with understanding his own power. He has the whole party behind him and beneath him. He's not worried about building a coalition. He is the coalition. Everyone from Wall Street to Republicans are coming to him. His policy positions are adopted wholesale. There's no debate over protectionism anymore. There's no debate over mass deportations. There's no debate over the deficits. A party
And
that
we're going to have mass deportation,
we are
right?
going to have mass deportations. Trump has just won 75 million votes, 300 plus electoral votes, and he believes he has a mandate. And so my conversations with him in recent days, I've been struck as someone who has interviewed him since 2010, going on nearly 15 years, 14 years, that he has never been more comfortable with who he is on the political stage and the mandate he believes he has behind him. Now, this may alarm you. This may excite you if you're a Republican. But don't doubt.
I bet there's some Republicans who aren't excited.
Very much so.
Yeah.
One of them works here at UVA, former Representative Liz Cheney.
Yes, right. Okay, right.
Well, she does work here.
Okay.
All right, we'll debate it later. But all right, let's continue. But anyway, now he's going to be tested again, as Bob always shows with your reporting. World events test presidents as much as you might feel like you have a mandate and a plan. Remember, Mike Tyson's famous quote is often quoted by Donald Trump. Everybody has a plan until they're punched in the mouth.
Yes, exactly. But this is remarkable.
Okay.
And no, it is remarkable that you are talking to him, that he is talking to a reporter of your caliber, because he knows you work for CBS, not the Washington Post now. Hopefully soon you will.
Well,
and I mean.
well, my approach to Trump is the same I have with everybody, which is Bob Woodward taught me to stick your pen in your leg and shut up. When you're talking to a source, listen. So when President Biden...
No, my little thing is...
I know, you do the thing with the finger.
This, I do. And this is, push it down into the fingernail so it hurts.
I don't like doing that.
And you know what? It's a memory aid to tell me to shut the fuck up. I know it's a university and you have free speech, right?
One of my most humbling moments, I don't think I've ever really discussed this with you, but one of my most humbling moments was, Bob is very Midwestern, former retired Navy officer, intelligence officer, a great reporter. You're very low key in your feedback. But one time you were looking at one of my transcripts and you saw there was a long paragraph of me talking instead of the source. And you go, well, that's a lot of you. All right, next question.
Probably true. Probably
Considering,
true.
Considering Trump's past cavalier view of nuclear weapons, how do you think a conversation like the one that Lloyd Austin had might go in the future with somebody in a similar position?
It's a great and critical question, and I hope, my friend Bob Costa is going to send a copy of War down to Mar-a-Lago for Trump. Now, we know he doesn't read books, but maybe somebody will give him a summary of it and so forth. But look, if we get out of particularly the young people back here, we get out of this century and no one uses nuclear weapons, that is going to be a big win for civilization. And everyone involved should be working on that.
Well, Trump's talked to you about nuclear weapons before and his candy approach to Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. Well, it's, we will. I had lots of conversations with Trump. I mean, what was, and this was the last year of his presidency in 2020, and the deal with him was he could call me anytime, and I could call him anytime. It's like having a bedroom in the White House, almost. And I mean, there's so many things about it that, and I've written lots about it, all these tapes are public and so forth, but he did not understand the obligation he had as president to protect the people from the coronavirus, and he could have done it. He could have, I mean, what we know is we deal with friends and children and so forth. Part of doing that, being a parent or a friend, is to help people do what's in their own interest also. And if in 2020, Trump had taken the knowledge he had, and it would have been in his interest to go public and say, I've been warned, this virus is coming, we're going to develop a plan, we're going to save America. Instead, 1.1 million people died of that disease. And his failure to do that, in my view, is a moral felony, because it would have been so easy to save and warn people. I think that's the number one job a president has, and he could have done it, and it's a shame because 1.1 million people died, and I know that it's all public, all the tapes and the Trump tapes and so forth. Now, he starts, for me, as a president-elect, when he's president, he gets a fresh start. He gets a clean slate. It's so important to everyone in this country, everyone in the world, that he do a really good job. And so, as I said publicly, my new rule is no cheap shots. No cheap shots at all. And a lot of things people in my business do are cheap shots, and I think we need to bleach them out.
We have time for one or two more.
Okay. First of all, my name is Jeff Robinson from Jeff
Put
Robinson.
the mic to your mouth a little more, please.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Robinson from Louisiana County, and I'm 64 years old. But I would like to say good afternoon to this distinguished panel of Bob Woodward, Robert Costa, and Professor Sabato. I heard a young lady stand up and ask a question of why she thinks Kamala Harris lost. This is my opinion. The Democrats are not strategic enough. She picked Tim Walz from Minnesota, which Tim Walz is a brilliant guy, a good guy.
What's your question, sir?
Well, my question is, if she had to pick Josh Shapiro, or maybe even Gretchen Whitmer, who is from a battleground state, the Democrat
answer to if history questions is we don't know.
Yes. That's the question. Yes.
And as a reporter, I tend to not overemphasize the vice presidential selection. People make a selection, I have found in my reporting, on the presidential candidate, not on the vice presidential. We have time for one more.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Hi, I'm here. You've talked about keeping an open mind and no cheap shots. going forward, what is the red line that Trump or the Trump administration might cross that would most severely test that open mind?
Don't know. Again, that's if history. I really think. I mean, one of the things from writing about 10 presidents over 50 years is presidents need to understand when they take that office or about to they have the goodwill of the American people with them. And sometimes they don't understand that. And I tell you, if we're not going to do a show of hands, but you have to have an incoming leader with that extraordinary concentration of power. You have to wish him well and give him your goodwill. I think that is that doesn't mean you're going to go along with it or roll over, but it means a sense of goodwill that I think can communicate, and this is the optimism in me, that, okay, the goodwill of the American people is out there for you to have on your side. You have to take it with actions that protect and are in the interest of the American people. And it's not hard to find what's in the interest of the American people, not in the interest of the candidate or the president-elect. You know, there really is, we've talked about this, something called national interest. There is a national interest. And Larry knows it because you've studied it for, 200 years. It's not hard to find. And so let's hope at the same time. No one knows as well as I who Donald Trump is, and that makes me really worried. Will he change? Will he listen? Well, I mean, I cite the national interest. We could take another hour here and make this a blackboard, and we could tell we could list what is in the national interest. And so with optimism covered with a full dose of realism, we need to look forward.
Go ahead.
Bob's going to sign books for a few minutes after, or we got to get going?
Sure, yeah, if people have books.
I'm quite sure that you'll be signing quite a bit. Look, well, first I want you to know, my last conversation with Thomas Jefferson was about the national interest. So we've had this in common for years. But we are so thrilled to have you two here. You know, I wouldn't feel so badly, and I mean this, I wouldn't feel so badly about Trump not reading books if he talked to you two more frequently, because it's like talking to a history book, really. And that's not a comment on your age, although it could have been. It could have been. But look, we're so thrilled. Go ahead. Did you have an answer?
No, I'm just...
Exactly. See? Okay. I figured you would come back at me on that, but we are so...
The national interest, it's not elusive. How many classes do you teach now?
Too many.
No, how many?
Well, an average semester would be 3.
Okay, take one of those classes and just say, the only thing we're going to do this class, and set up a blackboard, we're going to try to define the national interest. And I'll bet your students can do it better than you.
Well, see, I told you to have a response. No, Bob, they can do almost everything better than me. Okay, you got to know that.
Glad you know that.
We are really thrilled that you took time to come down here and be with us. I know you've got to go back up to Washington, so we understand if you have to leave before all the people are satisfied with their books. And you have to go up, you're going up 29, I guess. Well, it's really crowded because that's the way to Canada, and there's an exodus. One announcement before you give them a final ovation. One announcement. Tomorrow night we have one of our professors of practice, a name you'll recognize, Martin Luther King III, in the Dome Room at 6:30. You do not have to register in advance. Just come to the Dome Room about 6:15, and we'll be delighted to find room for you. I think what he'll have to say will be of great interest. Now, our final ovation for these two fantastic journalists.